Fascism. Study Session 7. Fascism. Introduction. In this study session, you will be exposed to a fairly recent political ideology, namely fascism. The study session is divided into two sections. Section 1 discusses the historical conditions that gave birth to fascism, while Section 2 deals with the major ideas and principles of fascism. When you have studied this session, you should be able to identify the circumstances or historical conditions that led to the development of fascism. You should also be able to highlight principles or ideas for which fascism is famous. Fascism arose from the disappointments and frustrations that followed the First World War, which took place between 1914 and 1918, and the economic depression in Europe during the 20s and 30s. It was in Italy that fascism first developed among the countries of Europe. Italy's participation in World War I on the side of the victorious Allies, that is, Russia, France, Britain, Romania, and United States, did not bring the anticipated benefits. Apart from the fact that Italy was denied its principal territorial claims, unemployment also weakened its economy. Betrayed internationally by its allies in the war and troubled domestically by a depressed economy, Italy's political stability was seriously threatened. In October 1922, Benito Mussolini, backed by his fascist party, threatened to march on Rome, Italy's capital, and was then invited to assume leadership of the country by the Italian monarch, King Victor Emmanuel, who was desperate to save his throne. On assuming leadership of Italy in October 1922, Mussolini proceeded to transform the Italian Republic into a personal dictatorship in which he monopolized power. Germany, which suffered a worse treatment than Italy in World War I, faced problems similar to those of Italy. After the war ended in the defeat of Germany, her territories were handed over to France, Poland, Denmark, and Belgium, and Germany was ordered to pay compensation to the victorious Allies for the destruction they suffered in the war. The German economy was also in bad shape as inflation and unemployment reached very high levels. As in Italy, Germany's external and domestic problems led to the formation of radical or extremist groups, one of which was the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, under the leadership of Hitler. In 1923, Hitler, encouraged by Mussolini's success in Italy, attempted a coup d'etat. The coup failed, Hitler was imprisoned, and the German economy recovered remarkably well enough to render the Nazi Party politically irrelevant. But Germany's economic recovery suffered a setback in 1929 when a worldwide economic depression took place. The Nazi Party resumed its political activity and enjoyed increased support under Hitler, who had been released from prison. Eventually, Hitler was appointed Chancellor or Prime Minister of Germany in January 1933, and like Mussolini in Italy, he proceeded to become a political dictator. With fascist dictatorships in Italy and Germany, European countries with weak democratic institutions or depressed economies became vulnerable to fascist and semi-fascist coups. Fascist-type dictatorships emerged in Austria in 1933, in Bulgaria in 1934, and in Spain in 1936. But fascism ceased to be a major political force in Europe with the defeat of the two leading fascist countries, Italy and Germany, in the Second World War in 1937 to 1945. To summarize our discussion in this section, fascism developed from the crisis of World War I and economic hardships created by the Depression of the 20s and 30s. Under such conditions, the appeal of radical and extremist mass movements increased. Fascism had the advantage over other movements in that it was supported by the ruling classes who were anxious not to lose their positions. Fascism first succeeded in Italy in 1922 when Mussolini assumed leadership of the country. This was followed by Germany and then Austria, Bulgaria, and Spain in the 30s. Fascism ceased to be a major political force in Europe with the defeat of the two leading fascist countries, Italy and Germany, in the Second World War. Principles and features of fascism. As a system of ideas and principles, fascism lacked the coherence and consistency associated with other systems of ideas like liberalism, conservatism, or socialism. Nonetheless, it is possible to highlight some of the most important principles and ideas associated with fascism. Nationalism and militarism. Nationalism is perhaps the most important feature of fascism. Nationalism refers to a powerful emotional commitment to a country. Fascists were very active and devoted nationalists. This nationalism found expression in the desire to bring other countries under the control of the fascist country. Mussolini and Hitler saw the conquest and control of other countries as a national mission through which they could increase the status and prestige of their respective countries. The tool by which they sought to achieve their ambitions was, of course, war or militarism. All the efforts of their respective countries were directed at building a powerful military industry. All sections of the society were mobilized in preparation for war. As Mussolini puts it, I adore war. War is to men what childbirth is to women. Totalitarianism. Totalitarianism refers to the belief that the government should exercise total control over virtually all aspects of social life. The powers of fascist governments covered all aspects of the lives of their citizens. The church, trade unions, educational institutions, business organizations, the arts, the media, and other social institutions were all within the control or regulation of government. Centralized economy planning. Fascists regarded centralized economic control as necessary to check the effects of depression and to build a viable military industry. In Mussolini's Italy, all major financial institutions and nearly all heavy industrial establishments were owned by the government. All other forms of private economic activity were under one form of government regulation or the other. In Germany, So extensive were the economic controls imposed by the fascist government that it called itself and was regarded by many as socialist. Fascist states were usually dominated by a single mass party. Non-fascist parties or organizations were usually declared illegal or suppressed through the use of force. Major questions of policy were decided by the topmost members of the fascist party. The fascist party usually had many subsidiary organs or units through which the party reached out to the people and mobilized them in support of the goals of the fascist government. Personal dictatorship. Fascism relied heavily on the dominance of a single person, the leader, who demanded and was given total obedience. The leader was regarded as an unfailing and infallible personality. All forms of propaganda and falsehood were used to increase the popularity of the leader. In Italy, the slogan was Mussolini is always right. In Germany, it was Hail Hitler. Terrorism and repression. The fascist party, aided by the secret police, operated as a chief instrument of terror. In Italy, the fascist party undertook the task of punishing rebellious and anti-fascist elements in Italian society. Many people were killed or driven into exile. One of the many victims of fascism in Italy was Matteotti, a socialist parliamentarian who was murdered in 1923 by fascists because he wrote a book titled The Fascists Exposed. Terrorism and repression were much more widespread in Germany than in Italy. In Germany, the fascists organized their own paramilitary units and used these units to kill uncooperative individuals and groups, including many former supporters of Hitler who did not like his ruthlessness, socialists, communists, trade unions, and Jewish merchants and shopkeepers. Study session summary. We noted in this session that fascism developed from the crisis of World War I and the economic hardships created by the Depression of the 20s and 30s. It was most successful in Italy and Germany and ceased to be a major political force with the defeat of these two countries in the Second World War. The principles and policies associated with fascism include nationalism and militarism, totalitarianism, centralized economic planning, party rule, personal dictatorship, and terrorism and repression. We have now come to the end of Study Session 7. Thank you for listening.